Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you send our way and, really pull apart the actionable knowledge inside. And today we've got a fantastic set of technical docs breaking down the mixing philosophy behind that modern melodic house sound. We're talking artists like Disclosure, Oliver Heldens. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today, it's pretty technical, but the idea is simple. We want to find the exact steps that turn a standard beat into that bright, lush, really melodic house track. It's all about contrast, really. We're trying to find what separates the sound from its leaner sibling, tech house.
And that's the whole game right there. It's not just about a different piano sound or a slightly different tempo. It's a complete philosophical shift in how you're using your frequencies. In tech house, the goal is often subtraction. It's minimal. You're creating this deep, darker groove where space is everything, less is more. But then you jump into the world of Disclosure and everything changes. Suddenly you have all these elements competing for attention. You've got disco strings, funky bass lines, big vocals, piano chords. So the mix has to feel brighter, it has to feel wider, and way more energetic. You're not just carving out space, you're actively managing a whole lot of information across the entire spectrum.
And you pointed out in the sources, there's one specific frequency area that really defines this whole difference in philosophy.
Exactly. This is the moment you realize why these genres sound so different. It all comes down to the 250 to 500 hertz range.
Ah, the low mids.
The low mids. If you're mixing tech house, you are generally clearing that space out aggressively. That's where mud builds up. And keeping it empty lets the kick and the sub just dominate.
You're sculpting with silence.
You are. But proper melodic house music, it uses that frequency band strategically. It's where the body, the keys, the warmth of your strings, the real funk of the bass line, where all that stuff lives. So using, and more importantly, managing that range, that's what gives the genre its musicality.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly. So if we want that energetic, bright sound, we have to start with a foundation that can actually handle all those layers. We're not just looking for sub-bass, we need that disco punch.
We do. The kick is the foundation, of course. But it's not like a heavy, round tech house kick. The house kick has to cut through. It needs to announce itself through all those other melodic parts. So for the kick drum, you'd start with a high pass at 30 hertz, get rid of the rumble. But the power comes from three very specific boosts. First, for depth, a pretty big boost at 50 to 60 hertz. We're talking +3 to +5 dB.
Wow, that's a lot of gain. You're really telling the kick to be loud and proud down there. Why is that aggression so necessary here?
It's because the whole mix just denser. We've got piano and strings filling up that 250 to 500 hertz range that would normally be empty. So to make sure the kick is still the anchor of the track, it has to push forward. Then for the body, you hit it with another boost at 100 hertz, maybe around +2 dB. And this is the critical part for that disco sound. You need that click, that presence, so you add a boost way up at 5 kilohertz. Another +3 dB.
Okay, boosting a kick at 5K, that sounds like it could get pretty brittle, right? Especially on a big club system. Wouldn't that just sound clicky?
It absolutely would in techno, yeah. But here, that high-end boost has a very specific job. It's all about attack clarity. That little click helps the kick feel louder and faster, so it doesn't get lost under the hi-hats and the strings and all the other bright stuff we're about to add. It's a signature pre that sound.
Got it. So we built a kick that's deep, full, and bright. So let's talk about the bass, because in a house, the bass line has to be melodic. It has to be funky. You need to hear the notes clearly.
Right, it's a melodic counterpoint, not just rhythmic support. So we still high pass it, maybe around 40 hertz. But the EQ is focused on bringing out its character. We boost the fundamental, of course, at 80 to 100 hertz by about +3 dB. But the real funk, the part that lets you hear the notes, that comes from a boost between 800 hertz and 1 kilohertz. Just +2 dB there. That's what brings out the harmonics, the pluckiness, that character that lets you follow the melody.
And this approach must have a huge effect on the sidechain compression. If the bass is that important musically, you can't just crush it every time the kick hits.
Precisely. The sidechain has to be way less aggressive. The philosophy is different. You're prioritizing the music over just pure rhythmic pump. So instead of a crazy 8.1 ratio, we pull it back to a gentler 4.1. And you're not ducking it by 8 dB either. You're just ducking it by -3 to -4 dB. It creates this subtle pump. It locks the rhythm. But you can still hear the bass line's melody moving underneath. It should feel seamless.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Okay, rhythm section is locked in. It's bright. It's punchy. Now we get to the elements that give the genre its whole character. The disco strings and keys. This is what's filling that space we talked about earlier.
Exactly. For strings or any orchestral stuff, you want them to breathe. You want this expensive, almost cinematic feel. So we high pass pretty high up at 200 hertz to keep them out of the way of the bass and kick. Then we shape the top end. A little boost at 2 to 3 kilohertz, just plus 2 dB for presence, and then for that shimmer, way up at 10 kilohertz, another plus 2 dB.
And I imagine the dynamics are crucial here. They can't sound squashed like a synth lid.
Absolutely not. They need to swell and breathe. So the compression is super light. We're talking a 2.1 ratio, maybe only getting 1 dB of gain reduction. Just enough to glue them together. But the real magic is the reverb and the stereo field. We use a Hall reverb and a really long one, like 34 seconds of decay, with a high mix of 40 to 50%. That's straight out of the 70s disco playbook. It sounds lush.
And for that huge orchestral width, the source material had some very specific panning advice.
It did. You use the classic orchestral setup. To get that massive width, you pan the violins maybe 40% to the right, and the violas 40% to the left. And just like that, you've pulled the strings outside the kick, the vocal, the bass. It just makes the whole mix sound enormous.
Okay, let's talk piano and keys. They're doing double duty here, right? They have to be melodic, but also percussive.
The attack is everything. For piano, you high pass at 100 hertz. Then you immediately go after what we call boxiness. So you make a crucial cut at 300 to 400 hertz, take out about negative 2 dB, and then to really highlight that percussive attack, the sound of the hammer hitting the string, you give it a sharp boost at 3 to 4 kilohertz, another plus 2 dB.
And you mentioned compression here is kind of a paradox. You're trying to control it, but also let that initial hit come through. How does that work?
It's all about a slow attack time. You use a 3.1 ratio, but you set the attack slow, somewhere around 20 meters. This is key. It lets that initial transient, that smack of the note, get through untouched before the compressor even starts working. It keeps the piano feeling bright and present, not dull. And for reverb, we switch it up. We use a brighter pleat reverb, but with a much shorter decay, maybe 1.5 to 2 seconds. Keep it clean.
All right, moving on to what I'd call the rhythmic and emotional core, the funk guitar, and of course the vocals. These are what really solidify that house sound.
For sure, that funky guitar part is like rhythmic glue. To make it cut, its EQ needs a big push in the mid-highs, a boost at 1 to 2 kilohertz, about plus 3 dB to give it that presence. And since it's a rhythm part, we want it consistent, so we compress it pretty hard. A 4.1 ratio, fast release, and a really quick attack, like 5 meters, to catch those pick transients. You'll see it doing a constant 3 to 4 dB of gain reduction.
And your source material points out that classic studio trick to make that guitar sound just massive in the mix, the double track trick.
Oh yeah, it's so simple but so effective. You just duplicate the guitar track, you pan the original one 60% left, and you pan the copy 60% right. Then you just nudge that second track. You delay it by a tiny amount, just 15 to 20 milliseconds.
And why is that 15 to 20 millisecond window the sweet spot? I'm guessing if you go lower, you get phase problems, and higher sounds like an echo.
You nailed it. Under 15 meters, you start getting phase cancellation. It thins out the sound. Go much higher than 25 meters, and your brain starts hearing it as two separate guitar hits.
Yeah.
But that 15 to 20 meters window, your brain just perceives it as one huge, super wide stereo guitar.
Perfect. Okay, finally, lead vocals. In this style, they are front and center. They're not just little chops. They're the main event.
Yeah.
They have to compete with that big kick and those lush strings.
And getting them to shine requires some surgical EQ. You'll high pass, of course, maybe 80, 100 hertz for a male vocal, 120, 150 hertz for a female. Then the critical mud removal is a cut at 250 hertz, taking out megas 2 to megas of 3 dB. That's where all the throatiness and rumble sits. But the most important boost, the one that makes the vocal cut through everything else, is at 3 to 4 kilohertz. A nice plus 3 dB boost there for clarity and diction.
And I imagine the compression is pretty heavy to keep it right in your face.
Yep, a ratio of 4.1 to 6.1, looking for a consistent 4 to 6 dBs of gain reduction. And the effects chain is vital for that pro sound. It has to have a delay, usually a 14 note, a nice hall or plate reverb, and a touch of light harmonic saturation.
Can you break down harmonic saturation really quickly for us?
Sure, just think of it as controlled distortion almost.
Yeah.
It adds these subtle upper harmonics, these overtones that make the sound feel denser and a bit compressed. It just helps the vocal sit in the mix better, gives it a kind of continuous presence so it doesn't sound thin or just pasted on top of the track. It's a type of glue. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, all this detailed work, it adds up to a very specific mix philosophy. The big takeaway isn't that the kick is dominant. It's that melodic clarity and aggressive energy are the top priorities.
That's a great way to put it. We can actually lay this out with the 7-step hierarchy that was in the sources. You can literally use this as a checklist when you're setting your breaker levels.
Yeah.
And you'll notice how different the priorities are here. Number 1, no surprise, is the kick. It's the loudest thing right in the center. But number 2, right behind it are the vocals. Loud, clear, and dead center. That is a fundamental difference from a mix where, say, the bass or a lead synth would be number 2.
Now, number 3, you have the bass, which is there to support the kick. Number 4 is the snare or clap, cutting through to define that backbeat.
And then you get the rest of the melody. So number 5 is your melodic elements, the strings, the piano. They need to be present and lush, but you have to be careful they don't overpower the vocal or mask that high-frequency click from the kick.
Right. And number 6 is your hi-hats and percussion, which you'll usually spread really wide to create space. And last, number 7, are the pads, just sitting in the background providing atmosphere. That whole hierarchy proves it. Percussive attack and melodic clarity are equally important.
So what does this all mean? I think the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into the Disclosure Oliver Heldens style is that the whole genre is defined by its willingness to use that low mid-range, that 250, 500 hertz area that other dance genres just get rid of. It's a philosophy of addition, not subtraction.
Absolutely. The goal is managing clarity and energy, not just managing space. And if you listen to those artists, Disclosure, Heldens, Armand van Helden, Duke Dumont, you can hear they're leaning on classic disco-era techniques, that plate reverb, the pan strings, that aggressive 5K boost on the kick. It all adds up to this incredibly energetic yet classic sound, which, it raises an important question for you to explore with this. We've laid out how these settings create this bright, classic sound by putting keys and vocals right at the top of the mix hierarchy. But when producers move into a genre like Future House, which often has way more aggressive synthetic sound design, replacing that organic piano with a really loud, complex synth lead, where in this 7-step hierarchy do they make room for that? How do you fit in that new texture without losing the critical presence you need for those Disclosure-style vocals and keys? That's something for you to think about as you start adapting these techniques to your own sound.